And we'd like to thank Srila Prabhupada for allowing us to come read to him every Sunday. And now for our 150 followers online, Hari Bol, you'll see that we now have the captions on the bottom of the video. So this will make hearing Krishna book much easier for you. Okay, as we always do, let's offer our respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. Nama Om Vishnuvedaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarane. And to each other, Vanchakalpatrubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So this week we're reading chapter 22, Stealing the Garments of the Unmarried Gopi Girls. According to Vedic civilization, unmarried girls from 10 to 14 years of age are supposed to worship either Lord Shiva or Goddess Durga in order to get a nice husband. But the unmarried girls of Vrindavan were already attracted by the beauty of Krishna. They were, however, engaged in the worship of Goddess Durga in the beginning of the Himanta season, just prior to the winter season. The first month of Himanta is Agrahayan, October and November. And at the time, all the unmarried gopis of Vrindavan began to worship Goddess Durga with a vow. They first ate havashan, a kind of food prepared by boiling together mung dal and rice without any spices or turmeric. According to Vedic injunction, this kind of food is recommended to purify the body before one enacts a ritualistic ceremony. All the unmarried gopis in Vrindavan used to daily worship Goddess Katyayani early in the morning after taking a bath in the river Jamuna. Katyayani is another name for Goddess Durga. The goddess is worshipped by preparing a doll made of sand from the bank of the Jamuna. It is recommended in the Vedic scriptures that a deity may be made from different kinds of material elements. It can be painted, made of metal, jewels, wood, earth, or stone, can be conceived within the heart of the worshipper. The Mayavada philosopher takes all these forms of the deity to be imaginary, but actually they are accepted in the Vedic scriptures to be identical with either the Supreme Lord or a respective demigod.
The unmarried gopis used to prepare the deity of Goddess Durga with worship, it with chandan pulp, garlands, incense lamps, and all kinds of presentations, fruit, grains, and twigs of plants. After worshipping, it is the custom to pray for some benediction. The unmarried girls used to pray with great devotion to Goddess Katyayani, addressing her as follows: O Supreme External Energy of the Personality of Godhead, O Supreme Mystic Power, O Supreme Controller of this material world, O Goddess, please be kind to us and arrange for our marriage with the son of Nanda Maharaj Krishna. The Vaishnavas generally do not worship any demigods. Srila Narottam Das Thakur had strictly forbidden all worship of the demigods for anyone who wants to advance in pure devotional service. Yet the gopis, who are beyond compare in their affection for Krishna, were seen to worship Durga. The worshippers of demigods sometimes mention that the gopis worshipped Goddess Durga, but we must understand the purpose of gopis. Generally, people worship Goddess Durga for some material benediction. Here, the gopis prayed to the goddess to become wives of Lord Krishna. The purport is that if Krishna is the center of activity, a devotee can adopt any means to achieve that goal. The gopis could adopt any means to satisfy or serve Krishna. That was the super excellent characteristic of the gopis. They worshipped goddess Durga completely for 1 month in order to have Krishna as their husband. Every day they prayed for Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, to become their husband.
Early in the morning, the gopis used to go to the bank of the Yamuna to take a bath. They would assemble together and, holding one another's hands, loudly sing of the wonderful pastimes of Krishna. It is an old system among Indian girls and women that when they take a bath in the river, they place their garments on the bank and dip into the water completely naked. The portion of the river where the girls and women bathed was strictly prohibited to any male. And this is still the system. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing the minds of the unmarried young gopis, blessed them with their desired objective. They had prayed for Krishna to become their husband, and Krishna wanted to fulfill their desires.
At the end of the month, Krishna, along with his friends, paid
When the girls in the water heard such joking words from Krishna, they began to look at one another and smile. They were very joyous to hear such a request from Krishna because they were already in love with him. Out of shyness, they looked at one another, but they could not come out of the water because they were naked. Due to remaining in the water for a long time, they felt cold and were shivering. Yet, upon hearing the pleasing, joking words of Govinda, their minds were perturbed with great joy. They told Krishna, "Dear son of Nanda Maharaj, please do not joke with us in that way. It is completely unjust to us. You are a very respectable boy, because you are the son of Nanda Maharaj, and you are very dear to us. But you should not play this joke on us, because now we are all shivering from the cold water. Kindly deliver our garments immediately, otherwise we shall suffer." They then began to appeal to Krishna with great submission. "Dear Shyamasundar," they said, "we are all your eternal servitors. Whatever you order us to do, we are obliged to perform without hesitation, because we consider it our religious duty. But if you insist on putting this proposal to us, which is impossible to perform, then certainly we will have to go to Nanda Maharaj and lodge a complaint against you. If Nanda Maharaj does not take action, then we shall tell King Kamsa about your misbehavior.
Upon hearing the appeal by the unmarried gopis, Krishna answered, "My dear girls, if you think you are my external servitors and you are always ready to execute my orders, then my request is that with your smiling faces, you please come here alone, one after another, and take away your garments. If you do not come here, however, and if you lodge complaints with my father, I shall not care anyway, for I know my father is old and cannot take any action against me."
When the gopis saw that Krishna was strong and determined, they had no alternative but to abide by his order. One after another they came out of the water, but because they were completely naked, they tried to cover their nakedness by placing their left hand over their pubic area. In that posture, they were all shivering. Their simple presentation was so pure that Lord Krishna immediately became pleased with them. All the unmarried gopis who prayed to Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband were thus satisfied. A woman cannot be naked before any male except her husband. The unmarried gopis desired Krishna as their husband, and he fulfilled their desire in this way. Being pleased with them, he took their garments on his shoulder and began to speak as follows. "My dear girls, you have committed a great offense by going naked in the river Yamuna. Because of this, the predominating deity of the Yamuna, Varuna Dev, has become displeased with you. Please, therefore, just touch your foreheads with folded hands and bow down before the demigod Varuna in order to be excused from this offensive act." The gopis were all simple souls, and whatever Krishna said they took to be true. In order to be freed from the wrath of Varuna Dev, as well as to fulfill the desired end of their vows, and ultimately to please their worshipable Lord Krishna, they immediately abided by his order. Thus, they became the greatest lovers of Krishna and his most obedient servitors.
Nothing can compare with the Krishna consciousness of the gopis. Actually, the gopis did not care for Varuna or any other demigods. They only wanted to satisfy Krishna. Krishna became very ingratiated and satisfied by the simple dealings of the gopis, and he immediately delivered their respective garments one after another. Although Krishna cheated the young unmarried gopis and made them stand naked before him and enjoyed joking words with them, and although he treated them just like dolls and stole their garments, they were still pleased with him and never lodged complaints against him. This attitude of gopis is described by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he prays, "My dear Lord Krishna, you may embrace me or trampling me under your feet, or you may make me broken-hearted by never being present before me. Whatever you like, you can do, because you have complete freedom to act. But in spite of all your dealings, you are my Lord eternally, and I have no other worshipable object." This is the attitude of the gopis towards Krishna.
Lord Krishna was pleased with them, and since they all desired to have him as their husband, he told them, "My dear well-behaved girls, I know of your desire for me and why you worshipped Goddess Katyayani, and I completely approve of your action. Anyone whose full consciousness is always absorbed in me, even if in lust is elevated. As a fried seed cannot fructify, so any desire in connection with my loving service cannot produce any fruitive result as in ordinary karma.
There is a statement in the Brahma Samhita, Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. Everyone is bound by his fruit of activities, but the devotees, because they work completely for the satisfaction of the Lord, suffer no reactions. Similarly, the gopis' attitude toward Krishna, although seemingly lusty, should not be considered to be like the lusty desires of ordinary women. The reason is explained by Krishna himself. Activities and devotional service to Krishna are transcendental to any fruitive result.
My dear gopis, Krishna continued, your desire to have me as your husband will be fulfilled because it is with this desire that you worshipped Goddess Katyani. I promise you that during the next autumn season you shall be able to meet me. You shall able to meet with me, and you shall enjoy me as your husband. Later, Krishna, in the company of his cowherd boyfriends, took shelter of the shade of some trees and became very happy. Thus, he addressed the inhabitants of Vrindavan, my dear Stoka Krishna, my dear Varuthapa, my dear Bhadrasena, my dear Sudama, my dear Subala, my dear Arjuna, my dear Visala, and my dear Rishabha, just look at these most fortunate trees of Vrindavan. They have dedicated their lives to the welfare of others. Individually, they are tolerating all kinds of natural disturbances such as hurricanes, torrents of rain, scorching heat, and piercing cold. But they are very careful to relieve our fatigue and give us shelter. My dear friends, I think they are glorified in this birth as trees. They are so careful to give shelter to the others that they are like noble, highly elevated, charitable men who never deny charity to anyone who approaches them. No one is denied shelter by these trees. They supply various kinds of facilities to human society, such as leaves, flowers, fruit, shade, roots, bark, flavor extracts, and fuel. They are the perfect example of noble life. They are like a noble person who has sacrificed everything possible, his body, mind, activities, intelligence, and words, for the welfare of all living entities.
Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead walked on the bank of the Yamuna, touching the leaves of the trees and their fruits, flowers, and twigs, and praising their glorious welfare activities. Different people may accept certain welfare activities to be beneficial for human society according to their own views, but the welfare activity that can be rendered to people in general for eternal benefit is the spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement. Everyone should be prepared to propagate this movement. As instructed by Lord Chaitanya, one should be humbler than the grass on the ground and more tolerant than the tree. The toleration of the tree is explained by Lord Krishna himself, and those who are engaged in the preaching of Krishna consciousness should learn lessons from the teachings of Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya through their direct disciplic succession. While passing through the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, Krishna sat down at a beautiful spot and allowed the cows to drink the cold and transparent water of the Yamuna. Being fatigued, the cowherd boys, Krishna and Balarama, also drank. After seeing the young gopis bathe in the Yamuna, Krishna passed the rest of the morning with the boys. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 22nd chapter of Krishna, stealing the garments of the unmarried gopi girls.
Chapter 23. Delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices. The morning passed and the cowherd boys were very hungry because they had not eaten breakfast. They immediately approached Krishna and Balarama and said, "Dear Krishna and Balarama, you are both all powerful. You can kill many, many demons, and today we are much afflicted with hunger, and this is disturbing us. Please arrange for something that will mitigate our hunger."
Requested in this way by their friends, Lord Krishna and Balaram arranged to show compassion to certain wives of Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices. These wives were great devotees of the Lord, and Krishna took this opportunity to bless them. He said, "My dear friends, please go to the house of the Brahmanas nearby. They are now engaged in performing the Vedic sacrifice known as Angiras, for they desire elevation to the heavenly planets. All of you, please go to them." Then Lord Krishna warned his friends, "These Brahmanas are not Vaishnavas. They cannot even chant our names, Krishna and Balram. They are very busy in chanting the Vedic hymns, although the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find me. But because they are not attracted by the names of Krishna and Balram, you had better not ask them for anything in my name. Better ask for some charity in the name of Balram."
Charity is generally given to high-class brahmanas, but Krishna and Balaram did not appear in a brahmana family. Balaram was known as the son of Vasudeva, a Kshatriya, and Krishna was known in Vrindavan as the son of Nanda Maharaj, who was a Vaishya. Neither belonged to the Brahmin community. Therefore, Krishna considered that the Brahmanas engaged in performing sacrifices might not be induced to give charity to a Kshatriya and Vaishya. But at least if you utter the name of Balaram, they may prefer to give in charity to a Kshatriya rather than to me, because I am only a Vaishya.
Being thus ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the boys went to the Brahmanas and began to ask for some charity. They approached them with folded hands and fell down to the ground to offer respect. "O earthly gods, kindly hear us, who are ordered by Lord Krishna and Balram. We hope you know them both very well, and we wish you all good fortune. Krishna and Balram are tending cows nearby, and we have accompanied them. We have come to ask for some food from you. You are all Brahmanas and knowers of religious principles, and if you think that you should give us charity, then give us some food, and we shall all eat along with Krishna and Balram. You are the most respectable of Brahmanas within the human society, and you are expected to know all the principles of religious procedure."
Although the boys were village boys and were not expected to be learned in all the Vedic principles of religious rituals, they hinted that because of their association with Krishna and Balaram, they knew all these principles. By addressing the Brahmanas as knowers of all religious principles, the boys expressed the point of view that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram, were asking for food, the Brahmanas should immediately deliver some without hesitation, because as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one should perform yajna, sacrifices, only for the satisfaction of Vishnu.
The boys continued, Lord Vishnu as Krishna and Balarama is standing waiting, and you should immediately deliver whatever food you have in your stock. They also explained to the Brahmanas when food is to be accepted and when it is not to be accepted. Generally, the Vaishnavas are pure devotees of the Lord, do not take part in ordinary sacrificial performances, but they know very well. The ceremonials call Diksha, Pashu Samstha and Sautramani. One is permitted to take food after the procedure of Diksha and before the animal sacrificial ceremony, and the Sautramani or ceremony in which liquors are also offered. The boys said, we can take your food at the present stage of your ceremony. For now, it will not be prohibited, so you can deliver us the food. Although the companions
of Lord Krishna and Balaram were simple cowherd boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class Brahmanas engaged in the Vedic rituals of sacrifice. But the Smarta Brahmanas, who were simply sacrificially minded, could not understand the dictation of the transcendental devotees of the Lord. They could not even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord Krishna and Balaram. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balaram, they did not care for them, and they refused to speak to the boys. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee Brahmanas, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. All their activities are childish because they do not know the purpose of the Vedas, as is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, to understand Krishna. In spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, their knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, if he knows Krishna or the science of Krishna consciousness, he is more than a Brahmana, and he is quite fit to become a spiritual master.
There are various details to be observed in the performance of sacrifices. They are known as desha, place, kala, time, pritag dravya, the different detailed paraphernalia, mantra or hymns, tantra, scriptural evidences, agni, fire, ritvik, learned performers of sacrifices, devata, the demigods, yajaman, the performer of the sacrifices, kratu, the sacrifice itself, and dharma, the procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices, because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth beyond the conception or speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for persons who identify themselves with the body, it is very difficult to understand him. The Brahmanas were very much interested in the comforts of the material body and an elevation to the higher planetary residences called Swargavash. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna.
When the boys saw that the Brahmanas would not reply to them, even with a simple yes or no, they became very disappointed. They then returned to Lord Krishna and Balram and explained everything that had happened. After hearing their statements, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smiled. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmanas, because that is the way of begging. He convinced them that one who is engaged in collecting or begging should not think that they will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that should not be cause for the disappointment. Lord Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of those Brahmanas engaged in the sacrifice. He also informed them that these wives were great devotees. They are always absorbed in thinking of us. Go there and ask for some food in my name and the name of Balram, and I am sure that they will deliver you as much food as you desire.
Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the Brahmanas. They found the wives sitting inside the Brahmana's house. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balaram are nearby. They have come here with the cows, and you may know also that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry. Therefore, we have come to you for some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna, Balaram, and ourselves."
Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the Brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balarama. These reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balarama. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. Being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives then became very busily engaged in filling up different pots with nice food. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various foods were all very palatable. After collecting a feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most beloved object, exactly in the way rivers flow to the sea.
For a very long time, the wives had been eager to see Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go and see him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go. But the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The women entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, which was verdant with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends.
Hare Krishna. The Brahmana's wives saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies. He wore marks of tilak, and he was smiling charmingly.
Merge into the existence of the Supreme. As the Supersoul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, and brothers, and despite all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should all varieties of occupational and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us the feeling of oneness in his Shikshastaka. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmanas in their love for Krishna.
Krishna welcomed them with the following words: "My dear wives of Brahmanas, you are all very fortunate and are welcome here. Please let me know what I can do for you. You are coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands is a completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self-interest, because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities."
Lord Krishna here confirms that the conditioned soul can reach the highest perfectional stage by surrendering to him. One must give up all other responsibilities. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Person of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme object of love. Everyone is loving his self according to the advancement of his knowledge. Ultimately, when a person comes to understand that his self is the spirit soul, and that the spirit soul is nothing but a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he recognizes the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of love, and then surrenders unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious for the conditioned soul. Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia which are very dear to us are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the central object of love because he gives us all bliss, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, or spiritual.
My dear wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna said, we can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties?
The wives of the Brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by tulsi leaves. So we have no desire to give up the shelter of your lotus feet and return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society. And what shall we do if we return home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and friends will no longer accept us at home because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection.
Hare Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, My dear wives of the Brahmanas, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you, because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives,
but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. Okay. Krishna is situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. So someone who becomes a pure devotee of the Lord Krishna, immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone, or nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection. Krishna said further, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association.
After being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performances of sacrifices as enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmana's wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the Brahmana's wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Being completely absorbed in his thought, she gave up her material body, conditioned by the laws of nature.
After the departure of the Brahmana's wife, Sri Govinda and his cowherd boy friends enjoyed the food they had offered. In this way, the ever-joyful personality of Godhead exhibited his transcendental pastimes in the guise of an ordinary human being, in order to attract the common people to Krishna consciousness.
With his words and beauty, he attracted all the cows, cowherd boys, and damsels in Vrindavan. All of them together enjoyed the pastimes of the Lord.
After the return of their wives from Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices began to regret their sinful activities in refusing food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had appeared just like an ordinary human being and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the faith and devotion of their wives. They regretted very much that although their wives were elevated to the platform of pure devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Soul. They began to talk among themselves. To hell without being born Brahmanas. To hell without learning all the Vedic literatures. To hell without performing great sacrifices and observing all the rules and regulations. To hell without family. To hell without expert service in performing the rituals exactly according to the description of the scriptures. To hell with it all, for we have not developed transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the speculation of the mind, body, and senses.
The learned Brahmanas, expert in Vedic ritualistic performances, were properly regretful, because if one does not develop Krishna consciousness, all discharge of religious duties is simply a waste of time and energy. They continue to talk among themselves. The external energy of Krishna is so strong that it can create illusion to overcome even the greatest mystic yogi. Although we expect Brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we also have been illusioned by the external energy. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that they could easily do what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a doorbell, for the continuation of material miseries. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness, and when they develop love of Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of Maya, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass.
The Brahmanas continued, according to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed to undergo the purificatory process of initiation by the sacred thread, nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashram of the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization. And by nature, they are not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. Okay. They have surpassed all of us in firm faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be masters in all purificatory processes, we did not actually know what their goal is because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we were reminded of Krishna and Balram by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he had no need to send them. He could have satisfied their hunger then and there just by willing to do so.
If someone denies Krishna's self-sufficiency on hearing that he was tending the cows for his livelihood, or if someone doubts his not being in need of the food, thinking that he was actually hungry, then such a person should understand that the goddess of fortune is always engaged in his service. In this way, the goddess can break her faculty habit of restlessness. In Vedic literatures like the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that Krishna is served in his abode with great respect by not only one goddess of fortune but many thousands. Therefore, it is simply illusion for one to think that Krishna begged food from the Brahmanas. It was actually a trick to show them mercy by teaching them that they should accept him in pure devotional service instead of engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. The Vedic ceremonial paraphernalia, the suitable place, the suitable time, the different grades of articles for performing the ritualistic ceremonies, the Vedic hymns, the process of sacrifice, the priest who is able to perform the sacrifice, the fire, the demigods, the performer of the sacrifice, and the religious principles are all meant for understanding Krishna. For Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Lord Vishnu and the Lord of all mystic yogis.
Because he has appeared as a child in the dynasty of the Yadus, we were so foolish that we could not understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahmanas said, but on the other hand, we are very proud because we have such exalted wives who have developed pure transcendental service of the Lord without being shackled by our rigid opposition. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, under whose illusory energy called Maya we are absorbed in fruit of activities. We therefore pray to the Lord to be kind enough to excuse us, because we are simply captivated by his external energy. We transgressed his order without knowing his transcendental glories.
The Brahmanas repented their sinful activities. They wanted to go personally to offer their obeisances unto him. But being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender unto him. In other words, it is very difficult for one to surrender fully onto the personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. The example of the learned Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. They immediately went to Krishna. But the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of King Kamsa because they were too much addicted to fruitive activities. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of 23rd chapter of Krishna, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices.
What do you think? Yeah, then we start the chapter clean. So that concludes our Sunday reading of Krishna book to Srila Prabhupada. Next week we'll be on chapter 24, Worshipping Govardhan Hill. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, for letting us come and read to you, and let us offer our respectful obeisances to you and to each other. Nama Om Vishnuvedaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarne, and to each other Vanchakalpadurubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Krishna Book, Hari Hari Bol.